ask the question, guys, are we already in recession? Now, the reason I want to ask that is some people actually already think we are in recession. And to Jack, we talk about, we're not in a technical recession, but Jack, as well as I, they're probably going to revise the data. Danielle DiMartino Booth has said, gone on record, dude, we've been in recession since October of 2023. There are people in my comments that said, hey, we've been in recession since 2020, 2022. Travis, you're crazy. We're already in depression. So we're going to see what the hell is going on. And before we do that, before I ask them each 3 questions, I want to talk about some recessionary indicators just very quickly with the viewers, starting with this one. This is the 10 and the 2 yield curve inversion. This is one of the most trusted single sets of data that basically warns of an incoming recession. You guys, we've been inverted since about April right here, you guys. So April Fool's Day. Who's the fools here? Anyways, we got inverted. First inversion was April Fool's Day of 2022. So after that, guys, we've been inverted for 27 months. So it's been 27 months since the most recent inversion. Another indicator is the trajectory of the unemployment rate. We now have a 0.5 increase over the 3-month rolling average. I believe that's called the Said's rule of recession. Basically, guys, the trajectory of unemployment is saying we are 100% guaranteed. Everyone's crazy that's saying otherwise. We're going into recession. The trajectory of unemployment says that. That's the second indicator. Now, here's another one, guys. Obviously, the government jobs. Government jobs are not healthy for the economy. The annual change in government jobs has been about 25%. Couple of notes I want to go over here. The last time we saw government jobs account for 25% of the total was right before the Great Recession. So generally, when we have this type of government interference, it's the sign of an unhealthy economy leading us into recession. But on top of that, guys, the trajectory, this is all lagging data, by the way. Like boots on the ground in our households, we already know this. This is lagging data. But another indicator is the trajectory of defaults and delinquencies. Purchasing power is important to the economy. Confidence of the consumer is important to the economy. So when we see this, it shows the consumer's unhealthy. It also shows, in my opinion, either reckless spending or number 2, inflation starting to hit our households. Now, the last indicator, again, you guys, is the government deficit being 1.2 trillion. This should update in the next day or so. No idea what this is going to update to. Maybe you guys know 1.4, 1.6, who knows at this point, but we're sitting at year-to-date fiscal year starting October at $1.2 trillion. Just for the viewers so they know and understand, that's not a sign of a healthy economy at all. That's government smokescreen. It makes things very difficult to understand. Inflation is very sticky. But in 2009, the deficit spending was 1.42. So 1.42 trillion to take us out of the great financial crisis. We've exceeded that already this year. To me, that's pretty concerning. But those are a few indicators, again, just for the viewers, for you guys as well. And I'm going to start, if I can, with you, Melody. I'm just going to ask you guys 3 questions. The first question is, Melody, in your opinion, a lot of people respect you, your background, you're around a lot of smart people, you track the data, you're super honest, super transparent. Love that about you. So hard to find, both of you. Are we already in recession?
Yeah, so I'll have a bit of a contrarian take, Travis, as per usual, but I just feel like, we're having debates about things that don't really matter and technical definitions and things of that nature. I think a lot of you that know me know that I think we've been in what's a silent depression. That's a term coined by Emil Kalinowski since 2007. And I think we've never really fully recovered. We surely had a ton of government intervention, and we were able to kind of skim on narrative and a lot of part-time jobs. But in reality, I honestly feel like we've been in a recession or a recessionary environment for some time, and most just don't want to admit it. When you look at the labor participation rate, that's something that I follow very closely. We're missing 6 million people. And so we are not we're not producing the way that we used to. And so when you break the trend lines, I believe that means that you are, we're technically in a different environment. So that would be my contrarian answer, Travis.
Okay, so your answer is we've been in a silent depression since 2007, and the only reason that the public doesn't know it, government printing, would you say?
Well,
Which,
yeah, that plus just ignoring. I mean, you can't, if you think about back to the Great Depression, things that we know now because we look at history books and we see photos, there were tent cities, there were people, so many homeless, people that couldn't find jobs. Well, if you travel to any city across this country, you're going to find that. Where you're not going to find it is in mainstream media. And honestly, I think a lot of times during the Depression as well, you didn't get that kind of coverage for political purposes. So I think this is just something that's been hidden. If you think about, if you guys remember what year it was that movie by Frances McDormand won all the awards, it was about van life, right? It was about her, her husband died. She retired. She was a temporary Amazon worker, and she sold her house and bought a van because she couldn't afford to live in her house. I think it was like 2018, 2017, somewhere around then. So I think these themes have been persisting for some time, but mainstream media has really done a great job of not covering it, as well as making us feel legitimately crazy.
okay. Jack, sir, same compliments to you, but I want to spare the viewers, so just know I love you and respect you. Are we already in recession? Okay, but for you, let me add something, a little bit to the concoction here, a little bit of spice. Understanding, I know we're not in a technical recession, okay? I know we're not in a technical, Travis, it's not technical, but understanding, Jack, like they always revise data. In fact, they just revised a whole bunch of new home data. So can't we put the revising of data into the equation of your opinion, perhaps, in this question?
All right, so you're right to point out how, the technical and the definition, and let's not get lost on the nuance. And we just had the comment up there from which is my girl Nan, from one of the moderators over at my channel. And I agree, arguing over definitions is pointless and it's a distraction. And, that reached a fever pitch in the middle of 2022 when we had those 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth. And yet everybody was like, no, we're changing the definition of a recession. So it's not. Yeah. We are in an environment where I think we're going to talk about this a little more later in some of the other topics, where people are being told, don't believe what their eyes and ears are telling them. Don't believe your lived, felt experience. And for, I think, 80% of the population in this country, probably more, but let's say conservatively, 80% of this country has been living in a recession, in a true recession, since the beginning of 2022, really since the stimmy stopped flowing. When the second the government stopped printing money and putting it in our mailbox, or just direct deposit, dropping that stuff right into our checking account, since that stopped, the quality of life of the average person in this country has started to gradually go downhill because life started to get more expensive. The unemployment rate has started to steadily rise. All of the conditions that matter to a real person in life have been full-blown recession, in my opinion, for more than 2 years. And Melody makes a good point. You could argue going all the way back to the GFC. And then, of course, some people might take us all the way back to 71. Some people might take us all the way back to 1913 when the Fed was created. But I think most of the country is living in a recession right now. And I think very few people are doing really well. The ownership class is doing fantastic right now, as all of the assets are at or near all-time highs. Stocks closed at another all-time high on Friday. And so that narrow subset of the population that owns and controls everything is doing great. And they also own and control the media. And the media is on air 24/7 telling everybody, what's wrong with you? You have it so well. You're bad vibes. You just consume too much doomer content on YouTube. Why don't you understand how good you have it? And, I just don't think that is divorced from reality. And it's one of the reasons why we're here on this channel, because that cheerleading for the elitists and for the ownership class has just reached such a fever pitch. And it's to the point now where it's insulting to people. You're being told, forget the hardship that you're living through. Here's this obscure government data point that says you have it really great. What are you going to believe?
That's the first time I've heard you break it down like that. I love how the viewers are also like, yeah, who cares about the definition? They keep changing it. It creates division. I mean, what really matters, like you just said, and I love that, Jack. Jack is saying since 2022, 60, 70% of Americans have already been living in recession. I mean, I've felt it myself. It's hard to save money. I mean, I'm taking hits left and right. That was beautifully said, Jack. Back to you, Melody, with the second question. And if you can, and to Jack's point, talk about, let's show compassion and empathy because we're normal people. I'm not filthy rich. I'm struggling like everyone. So we have the ability to show compassion. Plus Melody and I and Jack a bit too, lost a lot during the great financial crisis. So Melody, for the everyday person, just talking about real life, can you explain from what you've gone through and experienced, everyday person, what happens during recession?
Yeah. So, Travis, I feel like there's been several points in my life where I've been impacted by these macroeconomic factors. And, when you grow up, you think it's your story. You think it's just what happened to you personally. And I think that's what a lot of people think when they read mainstream media and they say, well, it must be my fault that this is happening to me, for instance. But my parents lost our home to foreclosure back in the 80s when inflation hit, and they thought that they had figured out how to budget. My dad was a teacher. At that time, my mom's plan was to stay home. Well, what happened? She had to go to work. That was not a decision that they wanted to make. They had plans for her to stay home, take care of the home, the garden, the family. And when she went back to work, it caused all kinds of stress and strife. And fast forward, divorce, like home lost, then addiction, things of this nature, because you feel such shame and you feel such, like hopelessness. And so these are the kinds of things that can really, wreck families. And that is, ultimately my reason for being here on Doomers News Network is, although people are calling me a doomer, what I'm actually trying to do is to give people the tools to be prepared for what's coming their way. So they are not, so they don't then create generational strife for their family because, they aren't prepared for the economic reality.
Okay. So, you have a way with words, Melody. These are very complicated things. So to be able to take all this complicated stuff and just tone it down to where everyone can really understand is beautiful. And I want to respond like this. When I was full-time working at Keller Williams as an in-house loan officer, I would create 10 action plans before I would approve one loan application. And so these action plans consisted of how someone would need to improve their situation to buy a house. Okay, like improve credit, save money, whatever. But I always started with the very first thing. Okay, the number one thing, every single action plan was not to lose hope. Not to lose hope. And you essentially hit the nail on the head because you felt it, you've lived through it. What we can expect through a recession is loss of hope. Right? And all of that is encompassed there, maybe a job loss, unemployment. So well said, loss of purchasing power. Jack, can you, I know probably you were fishing on a boat, I think the last recession in Alaska. But can you explain to the viewers, again, showing empathy, compassion to the everyday normal person like we have the ability to do so? I think that's why people watch us. I don't know. What the hell happens during recession?
Well, first of all, I wasn't an Alaska fisherman. I might be crazy, but I'm not that crazy. All right. I was a scalloper out of Barnegat Light, New Jersey. Smaller boat, smaller waves. In the wintertime, it's comparable to Alaska. In the summertime, it's a pleasure cruise. So I'm not quite that crazy. That being said, I remember going through the recession, right? I bought my first house with the money I made fishing. I also went back and finished college because I was a knucklehead and I screwed up in college when I had one semester to go. So I had to dig myself out of that hole. But I made really good money fishing. It was dangerous work. It was really hard work, but I did really well. I did what I had to do to dig myself out of my self-made mess. Then I bought my house and all of that equity just went up in smoke in the GFC, right? I bought my house in summer of 2006. By 2008, it was worth like half of what I'd paid for it. So I literally lost everything in the GFC. I still own the house, but I had negative equity in it. So my net worth went negative after the GFC. That was a wake-up call. There's one big difference. I'm going to get a little academic here for a second. A couple of economists you may have heard of, Case, Shiller, and Quigley. All right. The first two, Case and Shiller, you're probably familiar with their housing index. Quigley is lesser known. But those three guys did a study of data from the 1970s through the late 1990s, studying the wealth effect and how when you have recessions, when asset prices change, it changes people's behavior because it changes how people feel about their wealth. And Case-Shiller and Quigley found that the stock market, when it comes to the average person, the stock market actually doesn't have much impact on how wealthy they feel. When stocks go up or down, it doesn't really change their consumer behavior, their spending patterns. However, home values absolutely do impact people's behaviors and their spending patterns. And they found that when homes go down in value, people feel poorer and therefore they spend less money. Even though the value of your home doesn't really have a direct impact on your monthly balance sheet, right? The in minus the out, and then, the difference is what you save or spend. But when homes are going up in value, people are more likely to spend more because they feel richer. And when homes go down, the opposite effect happens. And that's important for a recession, because if this recession is accompanied by a big drawdown in home values, as I suspect it will be, it's going to lead to that phenomenon of people feeling less wealthy and therefore spending less money on things that have nothing to do with housing. They're just out consuming less. And well, our economy is about 70% driven by consumption. And so the wealth effect, if the recession reaches home values, as I think it will, that is a whole different animal. And that's when it can get very severe, as we saw in 2008, which was really the first big housing-led recession since the early 80s.
Okay, so in other words, what happens during a recession? I mean, I like how you broke it down. You say the wealth effects. I think that I would call it the ego effect. I mean, can we say the ego effect? I mean, because I'm sick and tired of hearing these losers. I'm just kidding. They're not losers. They got millions of dollars and I don't. So they're the winners, right? Then what's with the ego? I mean, what's wrong with these people? I mean, help some people out if you have millions of dollars, for the love of God. I'm sorry. So during the recession, we lose a little bit of the ego or wealth effect. It changes the mindset of consumers. And really what Jack is pinpointing from what I'm hearing, Jack, is confidence and trust. It's shocking. It's really shocking to me. And it blows my mind. Maybe I should study more of this. You guys know that I'm with the slow reading group. Didn't even make it through college. I suck. Okay. But holy smokes, the economy is run off of feelings, trust, and confidence.
So yeah, confidence is a big one. When talking about housing prices and the wealth effect, it really does. It affects people's confidence and therefore what they spend. And that's going to affect employment. That's going to affect layoffs and things like that. If people stop spending, then we're going to lose jobs in sectors of the economy that have nothing to do with housing.
Yeah. So, 70% of the economy is run based off confidence and trust. Okay. And we haven't even started the technical recession because they haven't revised the data yet. Anyways, because once they revise the data to the truth, won't that affect confidence and trust? But moving on to the last question, because we're running a little long on my segment here. Melody Wright. Okay. She's got a Substack. You guys check it out. Are we going to do, we you know what? Melody and I are broke. Well, I don't want to speak for you. I'm broke. I want to travel around the nation. I'm broke, Melody. I want to travel around the nation. I want to cover Florida. We got to talk to the viewers about covering Florida. But again, you've gone through this before. All of us got hit. I got hit. Last question. How does the normal everyday person, knowing they're a little bit stuck on the rat race, how do you prepare for recession, Melody? How do you become successful at the other end of it? How do you find good deals? How do you prepare for this?
Yeah. So I'm going to say a lot of things nobody will probably like, but for me, looking ahead at what was coming, I made a lot of radical shifts in my life. But the first thing you have to do is get out of debt. I mean, what's going to really wipe out a big swath of Americans this time around is going to be that credit card debt and those high interest rates. You just never can get out from under that cycle. And I would say, you have to reduce your doom spending. There is hope. In fact, like different than you and Jack, actually, during the GFC, I had no assets. So I actually did really well during that time. I was one of those people that what I had was a skill set. I could plug and play anywhere. And this is what I would say to people as well. You've got to be open to lifelong learning. You have to teach yourself new tricks, new trades. Because if you can plug and play, you'll be the one that gets the job when 10 other people don't. And so that's the other thing that I would do is sit down and think about, okay, what skills do I have that nobody else has? And what could I do if I lost my job? Or how could I do a side hustle that's not Uber? Because guys, I'm so sorry to say, those side hustles during a recession are not going to pay the bills. DoorDash, Uber, all that stuff, even OnlyFans isn't going to work out so well because people just aren't going to have the money to spend. And so, where you really have to think about what could I do if I had to, if I was, backed up against the wall and I need to make extra income, what could I do? That's another thing. And then I'll just go back to the doom spending because, what we're seeing right now is everybody talks about experiences. What does that even mean, guys? Like, what that means is that we have traded in our dream for a very ephemeral experience. Don't do it. Don't fall for it. Part of the reason we have is precisely what Jack and Travis were just talking about, that consumption is 70% of GDP. If we stop spending, then everything comes crashing down. The problem is that every time you spend when you don't actually have the money, you are becoming, a debt slave. And so these are the types of things, just look at your current situation. What could you do to save money? How could you more aggressively reduce debt? Could you get some chickens so that your eggs aren't $6.99 at the grocery store? I mean, Jack has some chickens. I'm getting some chickens. Could you plant a garden? All of these things you just have to, just start to take the steps now. Another thing I did is I consolidated households. I moved my mom in with me. Before that, I was thinking of carrying a mortgage for her. That just doesn't make sense with what I'm seeing ahead. And so these are the types of things I would say are how you can prepare for a recession. But honestly, the most important thing, and this goes to the name of your channel, Travis, is your mindset. And this, honestly, a recession can be an area of great opportunity for people, because if you are paying attention when everybody else, all the Airbnb bros and everybody that with those big egos and their millions of dollars are like, they don't have anything left, you're going to be the one that's going to be able to go out there and take advantage of the opportunities.
I mean, I can't follow that. That was so powerful, Melody. I want to go in that corner right there and just curl up like a little child in a ball, because I'm scared now. She's so powerful. I mean, you guys, did you hear what she said? I mean, she hit the nail on the hammer. I mean, it all starts with mindset. With your mindset, you could do anything. And she basically said, stay open to learning, right? Understand your value, even if it's plug and play. And when you understand your value, understand your skill, but fall in love with it, almost obsess, be proud of yourself, right? You also mentioned cutting expenses. I love your self-employment analogy. Oh my gosh, that was good. Cut expenses. She consolidated household. I absolutely love, this is one of the biggest reasons I lost everything. I was in a credit card trap. When I lost everything, I filed bankruptcy. I was in over $100,000 in credit card debt. I was in that trap because credit card debt's horrible. You cannot pay it off making minimum payments. You're in credit card debt for the sake of argument for freaking ever. Okay, so it's horrible debt. People are in a trap. People can't get out. But you don't have to be one of those people, right? You change your mindset. You change your spending. Get out of credit card debt. Number two, mindset. Number one. Number two, get out of credit card debt. Well said, Melody. Well said, Jack. I think you're on the losing end here. We're not in a competition, but in the private chat, this is a competition, brother, and you're losing. My opinion, let the commenters judge you. We love to be judged as human beings, of course. I mean, who doesn't love being judged, right? Jack, how do you prepare for recession? The everyday American citizen, consumer, some of them care, some of them don't. How the heck do you prepare, brother?
All right, so let me say to our target audience here, I'm guessing the average DNN viewer is probably middle class, upper middle class, maybe probably got a little bit of wealth and assets, maybe not loaded, but they live a comfortable lifestyle and they're self-educating, trying to learn more to reach that next level. So in a recession, I think it's key to remember that losses are more powerful than gains. All right, it's always important to keep that in mind. Let me give you an example. All right. You got $100 worth of a stock or $1,000 worth of a stock, and that stock goes down by 50%. You need to make 50% to break even, right? No, that is wrong. If you lose 50% on a trade, now you need to make 100% on your next trade just to break even. So that 50% loss was twice as powerful as the gains you make to recover from it. So I think the key is to avoid losses in a recession. And, I was a little early calling the recession, as a lot of people were. So I've sat out this monster move in the stock market. I've been sitting in gold, silver, Bitcoin, and treasury bills since really the middle of 2022. So I didn't catch the AI mania. I didn't ride the S&P to all-time highs, but you know what? Gold is at an all-time high, or a few dollars below it. Silver is at a 30-year high right now. Bitcoin is just rallying like the blazes the last few weeks notwithstanding. So I've been positioned very defensively, very carefully to avoid losses, to make sure I don't get wiped out like I did last time during the last recession. So I think avoiding losses is more important than going after those big gains. Pay attention, you people who are chasing tech stocks at these valuations here. Think about that, lose 50%. What do you need to do to gain it back? So I like things like preserving wealth. I like the U.S. Treasury bills. Right now I can still get over 5% on a 1-month T-bill. I'll take that. I like gold and silver at all-time highs. And the other thing is, keep in mind what the reaction to a recession is likely to be. Why is gold and silver at an all-time high? During recessions, typically gold and silver go down. But it's what is the government and the Federal Reserve's reaction to that recession? Almost always lower interest rates and print money. And that's why I think gold and silver are sniffing that out while they're near all-time highs right now, is because of that reaction to the recession and what that's likely to cause.
Great answers, Jack. I just realized I'm not part of the middle class. I mean, I'm over here as well, with Melody. I'm just trying not to be depressed in the corner. You know what I mean? I'm working on my mindset, trying not to get into credit card debt. You're talking about minimizing risks, minimize your losses for the people that have that much money. But I like your point. I like what you were saying. Risk off, right? My money for my down payment for a house is in, safe investment. Losses are more powerful than gains. I think you said it well. I think it hits a wide range of us. That's pretty much going to sum that up. Let's see if there's any, you guys, any questions for me before we move on and I take some comments here.
Well, Travis, what do you think? Are we in recession right now? I see you have on Danielle's shirt, so maybe this is time.
This is my shirt. This is my shirt.
Okay.
I don't wear no one's shirt but my own shirt.
Is that what you're saying? Danielle might differ on that, but
she has one, by the way.
I'll tell Danielle right now. I'll call her out. Hey, this is my shirt. I mean, we got a problem with my shirt. But
we gave her one of those shirts.
I gave her 3.
Yeah. Okay.
3 of these shirts.
Yeah.
Are we already in recession? Here's the problem, man. I mean, first of all, this is a loaded question, but the moment that you remove the deficit spending, we're in depression. But I think we really have to acknowledge the inflation. I think we have to acknowledge the deficit spending, the fact that it's kind of a stagflation environment. We've already collapsed and had massive unemployment. I think as a result of purely deficit spending, mortgage-backed security purchasing as well, quantitative easing, man, I think that they've kept us out of recession. I think, again, like you said, depending on your household, you've been in recession. When you remove the deficit in the government intervention, mortgage-backed security, we've been in depression since 2007. I'm not debating that. I'm not debating the interference of the government. What I'm saying is this is just how things work, and it sucks. And I do not believe, I don't believe so, Melody. I think that there's more pain still. I think that they've made this market so toxic with inflation, it's going to hurt before we get to that, past that threshold. So I don't think we're there yet. I think it's going to hurt more. I think we're very close. I don't think we're there yet. I think there's more pain. I just think that unfortunately they have broken the financial markets with inflation. And now we're paying for it. We're sitting here, we're suffering when we're paying for it. And it's just, it doesn't seem American, okay? It doesn't seem American, but this is a situation and I have to acknowledge it. So Jack, any questions?
Now, I've got a couple of questions in the comments there, asking people to define middle class, and that was a really good question, and I've been trying to ponder that.
Here it is. Boom.
A few years ago, I might have given an income level as makes you middle class, but now with inflation being what it is, I wouldn't even try to venture a guess. I mean, how would you define middle class at this point? Is home ownership a threshold for middle class? Well, no, not necessarily. That's a really good question, and I'm having a hard time coming up with an answer to that. Go ahead.
I can answer it because I'm not in the middle class. Okay, so like the middle class is when you have to worry about like gains and like, minimizing risks and losses and stuff. And like not middle class is like when you work on like mindset and you're like in the corner back there all scared and stuff like me. So I would say that would be the definition. But what do you think, Melody?
Travis, yeah, I like your answer to some degree.
I'm not middle class, man. I'm not.
No, but I think it is, what a lot of people define it as is, really you only needed one person to be working, to sustain your existence. You were able to afford your home, your property taxes, your insurance. And maybe it was a smaller home, by the way, guys. It didn't have to be a McMansion, but you were able, to pay your bills. You had money in the bank, and a $1,000 emergency would not crucify you. And so I think that, with 60% of Americans unable to afford a $1,000 emergency, then we really, it feels as if we don't have a middle class anymore. We have the top 20%. We have a tiny sliver left in the middle, but I'd argue probably not really, because they're so over leveraged. So even those that, when they say they can't afford $1,000 emergency, what happens if you take away their credit cards? How many more people can't afford $1,000 emergency? And so without debt, or, sort of without credit, I should say, a lot of credit, I would argue that probably there is no more middle class.
I mean, when credit cards are the lifeline to your lifestyle, something is broken, you are in a trap. Credit cards should not be the lifeline to continue your lifestyle. Jack, I got a question for you, a little bit polarizing, but he's basically asking, the next recession may be caused by World War III. Hypothetically, China cuts off imports into the U.S. Scary question to Jack. How do you prepare for that type of situation and depression?
So if China cuts off imports to the U.S., China is also cutting off their own exports. So that is not a China has us by the cojones situation. I would submit China needs our shelves more than we need their crap on it, to be honest with you. All right. We get a lot of our plastic consumer garbage that breaks in 6 years from China. Now, the U.S. is relatively food and energy secure. We still import a lot of energy, but we produce a ton of it. So if it really were to come to like a trade embargo, keep in mind, U.S. submarines parked outside the Strait of Malacca, right outside of Singapore, would absolutely smother the Chinese economy. So I think China would be more hurting in that situation, to the point of like great famine hurting if that were to happen. The one real vulnerability I think the U.S. has, and something you would want to consider preparing for, is medicine. We get a lot of our medicines from China still. And if China were to cut us off, I think that would be a very real felt danger for a lot of people. So if you have conditions that you're dependent on regular maintenance medicines, having a plan for a backup or even a supply, if you can possibly stockpile it somehow, is something to think about. But beyond that, I think that scenario would be more painful for the Chinese than it would be for us, believe it or not.
Moving on to the next question. MREs, I have a ton. I have a whole bunch of boxes. The good MREs, the peak. Melody, question for you. Take a jab at this one. This should be fun. Trey, love you, Trey. Thank you for watching, brother. He's a huge member of the community. Big shout out to Real Estate Mindset community. I love you guys. Thank you for your support. I can't do anything without you guys. I'm doing all this for you. Thank you for the life you've helped me make. I want to get back to you. Question, Melody. Trey, I love you. Why are homes staying in pending at record rates? Why?
Well, like a pending sale, I think that's because people they can't qualify. I mean, I think that's the biggest part of it. We just saw Optimal Blue came out with this. We had lower rate locks in June, so what that means, what a rate lock is when you you have a mortgage and you lock on that rate to do the origination of the mortgage. And so those are lower, meaning that less people are even trying at this point to get a mortgage. And if they try, if they do try, they're getting denied, or they're looking at that final insurance bill and saying, you know what, I can't do it. And so although we did see mortgage applications up a little bit, not from historic levels. And so I think that, a lot of people are talking about increased activity. The reality is you can increase activity all you want, but if they can't qualify or they don't have the cash to purchase that purchase that home, then it's not going to result in completed sales.
Trey, buddy, they can't afford it. So thank God it's been pending, because maybe they'll have a second epiphany or something. Because the first epiphany was like, you know what? It's a great idea to buy a house. I have to do it. I have to rush do it, right? I'm ready. I can afford it. So hopefully they get that second epiphany and they pump the brakes a little bit. A couple more questions here. We'll move on. This Jack, just knock this one out, man. I mean, can recession and deflation occur at the same time for the viewers? Deflation is prices going down, not disinflation. No. Disinflation is inflation slowing. It's still horrible. Deflation, prices down. Jack.
Absolutely. Recessions are deflationary, or at the very least, they're disinflationary, which means they lead to prices going up slower. When you have contracting economic activity, you have higher unemployment, people have less money available to spend. And so they don't have infinite dollars to bid up NVIDIA stock prices, or to bid up the price of gold or Bitcoin or any other stock or home prices. So absolutely, you start to see asset prices come down in a recession. That is deflationary. Now, does that lead to consumer deflationary? The GFC did. Remember how cheap gasoline got during the GFC? So that led to consumer price deflation very briefly, because then you have to start thinking about what will they do? What will the Fed do? What will the Treasury do? They'll borrow, they'll print, they'll lower rates. That's when it becomes inflationary. So it's kind of a sequence of events. You have to where's your beginning and your end? The recession is initially very deflationary. You start to see asset prices come down. That would lead to consumer deflation if they let it. They probably won't let it. They'll probably go zerp and burr, zero interest rate policy and printing money. So yeah, it can happen. It's guaranteed to happen if we just do nothing, but we don't know how to do nothing.
All right. And Jungle Book has a great question. I'm going to save that for my second.
Because I think this is a good lead into the next story. Jack's very last comment.
All right, guys. So moving on to our next story.